Thank you very much for coming to my little talk today. My name is Claus Aasholm, and you might have seen me, roaming around LinkedIn among, other slop. I'm quite busy on LinkedIn, and that's really a key indicator for me if what I'm working with is still relevant. So I'm bred and born in the semiconductor industry. Back in the 80s, I know I look too young for that, but it's true. And back in the 80s, semiconductor companies owned their own factories. Some still do, okay? But in those days, the industry was run by what I call the silicon cowboys. They wore a gun and a big stick and told the truth, okay? I've been in meetings where my CEO shouted at us all and say, I'm going to start firing from the top, but I'll get down to you lowlifes soon, okay? And it was like, okay, I think we got it. But about a little over a decade ago, the industry changed. It became more, polished, suits entered, and it was much more corporate speak. And I remember about a little over a decade ago, I worked in a company where our CEO told us that we had a great quarter, above average, and we gained market share. And I was like, I'm not sure. Why? This is not what I feel. So I said, okay, let me take a break. That became a long break a little bit later. You shouldn't challenge the CEO. And I found out that, I checked 25 companies. I read their reports. I went to the investor calls, looked through everything. And funny enough, they all had a great quarter. They were all better than average. And I was thinking, hey, this is turning into a great industry. I want to work here. Everybody can win. We don't need to worry about market shares, winning or losing, up or down. This is fantastic. But of course, companies in average are average. And when you start cooking the numbers, you find out that, while the CEO is not lying, they're certainly presenting a way or a version of the truth that is palatable to the company. So this was the beginning of my little venture called Semiconductor Business Intelligence. I started to do this in a more organized way. I listened to what all the CEOs said, and then I checked the numbers. And over time, this started to develop. It started to develop from just a few companies to quite a lot. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my view of the semiconductor industry, what's going on right now, and based on the data that I have. It's not always what's going on out there. There's something is not going to be a surprise to you. That it's AI dominant is not going to be a surprise to you. And there are other things that are not going to be a surprise to you. But there are also some things where it's not just a matter of if you're surprised, if you've heard this before, it's how fast it's moving. And it's moving very, very fast now. So a little bit about me. I'm what I call uncorporated. That basically means that there's no sane company that would hire me. The last CEO I had when I was in corporate called me troublemaker, and that's probably why I have to be on my own. This troublemaking is good when you're trying to, be critical also of yourself and what's going on. And first and foremost, I'm an analyst. I'm not trying to sell you anything. And when I do my analysis, I'm not looking for something. Sometimes, I start the morning and then suddenly nothing happened, which is sort of like, oh, what a day. But it is the case, oftentimes nothing happened, and that's also data. What I do is I do my analysis, and on top I put my opinion. What do I see? It's not always right. Other opinions are welcome. But if you want to challenge my facts, I suggest you bring data. The other thing you'll find about me is if I said something a month ago, I can say something different now. Because we have more data. We have more analysis to be done. And don't get stuck in a certain corner of a certain analysis that you've fallen in love with. So this is where I begin from. To my surprise, when I started doing this, there was actually somebody out there who listened to it. And I have a lot of interaction. Right now, my connections, LinkedIn connections are about 15,000, and I have 31,000 following me. And these are all pretty available to talk to if I want to. And I don't want insider information. I want my data to be investment grade because I have banks that use it. So you don't want any insider information. So everything that I work on here is public data. And then at a point in time, I said, okay, I began to write about it, and to my surprise, people are reading it and they're actually paying for it. But I'm in a lucky situation where I'm financially independent. So yeah, I like a buck or two, no problem there. But I don't need to take any jobs I feel uncomfortable with, because the second I do that, I'm basically selling myself. You can't sort of like decide that you're partly independent. You have to be independent all the time. So this is sort of my what should you call it? I think in the industry you'll call it a data sheet. So I think this is what it is. So let me talk a little bit about my methods. So I don't treat the industry as a supply chain. That's what it looked like in the old days. Now it's much more complex. We're seeing, people that are expanding into other areas of the business that they didn't do before. And here, you just see sort of like the popular version of what I cover. In reality, I cover a lot more than you can fit up here. But the model sort of uses, up here you've got the investment zone. What do you need to invest in to make semiconductors? Down here, there's supplies. What do you need actually to fill if your factories get stuff moving? Over here, you've got manufacturing moving through the supply chain down to EMS and distribution companies. And then you have ODMs, end customers, and eventually up here you've got the cloud customers and a number of other demand drivers. So up here, what you can see, this is sort of like a simplified network. And what happens every year is that this gets more complex. It's not like, oh, suddenly it got a lot easier. No, there's only one direction. It gets more complex. So let me show you my data model, if this one works. So you see my data model here. All of these things out here are a combination of customers and products. And in here you see the network, how it's connected. And then you see sort of like this is constantly in movement. So most people that use market research, they use market research in a certain area. And often it's the area that you are not participating in, but winning in. Okay, we have this area over here. We're not doing very well. Let's exclude that from our research because it makes us look bad. And this new area over here looks very good, so we need to include that into our market research. So you sort of select the areas you want to play in to make yourself look good. Nothing wrong with that. You want to make sure that your people and your shareholders and everybody are very impressed with your company. But the problem is that you are sort of confining yourself into an area where you really know you're winning, and that's not where the surprise is going to come from. It's going to come from somewhere outside that little area where you feel comfortable. Some prime examples of where the industry has moved is, of course, a company like Samsung participates in many, many different areas. They're one of the most successful memory companies ever. They've had a few glitches, but they're getting back into shape. At the same time, they're selling mobile phones. They're selling HVACs. They're doing a lot of things. What I found most interesting about Samsung is that if you think the competition outside Samsung is fierce, you should know about inside Samsung. Because the model of Samsung is built up on, okay, what does a cell phone need? It needs some memory, it needs some compute, and we have both, so we can supply internally. But if you think that Samsung Mobile gets a break from the memory division right now, you guess again. Okay, they have to pay the price of the memory right now, and lately it just came out that I think the executives of the mobile division were asked to travel coach. I don't know what the memory division is traveling, but they're probably private jetting right now. It's quite interesting. Then you have Intel. Intel is challenging the model that TSMC has. TSMC has one strict rule that they apply, is that we never compete with our customers. That means they won't suddenly go out and say, okay, let's do our own chip. ARM just did that, we saw. and it'll be interesting to follow, but TSMC doesn't. Intel's newest venture is not necessarily driven by a wish to succeed. It's probably more driven by a need to succeed. And Intel Foundry so far is not doing incredibly well, but it's still early days. But they're basically offering technology that they do themselves. So you'll be competing with Intel if you choose their factory. And the question is always, when there's not enough products, who will get? I don't know. But TSMC is right now living on that. So there are other companies that can deliver leading edge technology, but people tend to choose TSMC, maybe because they don't compete with their customers. Then we have NVIDIA, incredible company. NVIDIA made a decision to compete with their customers. So when we look at revenue, it's sort of like 60 billion plus. This is not semiconductor revenue in its true form anymore. These are not devices. The closest to devices are GPU boards with 2 chips and a lot of memory. And most of their memory is 2-ton boxes of AI servers. So really, they're now competing with all of their server clients that they're at the same time supplying GPU boards to. That's a very, very thin line to walk on. For now, NVIDIA can do what the hell they want. But that's not maybe necessarily the case in the future. So all of these things are sort of weaving this network of a very, very complex supply chain. Then we see, normally you've seen companies being bought and then become divisions, but the other things are happening as well. We saw SanDisk just were thrown out into the free market because, sort of it was just noise in Western Digital, and now it's a company. So all of this is very, very complex. And every morning I get up, I know that there's not a God that has sent me something that becomes less complex. No, but you're in for a ride here. It just becomes more complex. So in order to really operate in this environment, you have to just state that complexity is your friend and then get on with life, okay? A lot of the confusion when we talk about industry numbers is basically about the definitions, okay? So how do you define a semiconductor? Is it a device, a little black thingy? Is it a board? Or is it a 2-ton NVIDIA server or something bigger? And that's where everything starts from. Most research is not wrong. It's just another definition of what you were expecting. So just bear that in mind. And for me, I can cut my numbers any way I want to, so I'm not too worried about that. So another thing that's interesting about seeing the industry as a network is that then it becomes a time machine. So before something happened, something else had to happen. You don't suddenly make $1 billion in revenue. It had to propagate through the supply chain in one sort of form. So here you see a green company. It's not a spectacular company, but it did well. But around this period here, beginning of the 20s, they made a bet. Okay? And you can see it here in headcount. It suddenly took a completely different trajectory. And this is one of the secrets about the semiconductor industry. You don't get lucky. It doesn't exist. Before you get lucky, you have to make a big bet. Once you made that big bet, then you have to get lucky. Because not every big bet wins. You can see Intel did a big bet. They didn't make it. But this company made it. They made the big bets, and things turned out like this. This is 24, end of 24. When we began this journey over here, Intel stock price was $6. So it would have been good to know at that point in time. I have to say I didn't catch this one. It was in my data, but I didn't catch it. But it didn't matter because I bought NVIDIA back in '99 because I was a gamer. I thought they made amazing, graphic cards, and then I got lucky. But it's not just about investment. I have to say I don't give stock advice, even though banks use my data. I maybe use it a little bit for my own portfolio, but you make your own decisions, do your own research. But the reality is that this is incredibly important when you are maybe a supplier, maybe you're a customer. If you are buying electronics, you want to know when it pops, because you will be late to the party. You can't get your allocation, you can't get what you need, or it's going to be very, very expensive. So how that operates is quite important. Just updated it with a little bit. Now it's 60 billion plus. Quite an amazing company. But again, is it a semiconductor company? You decide. All of this is important because for a good strategy process, and I boil it down to three very, very simple questions. You need to begin with what is going on. This is absolutely fundamental. And if you have a company full of corporate candy floss where we all talk happy speak and you are told that you need to be positive and everything else, this is not a good foundation for strategy. You need to be brutally honest of where are we good, where are we bad, what do we need to improve, and what's going on. And this is what I supply to some companies. If they ask me to, can you put it a little bit in a certain direction? No, thank you, I'm not interested in that. Once that is established, you can then decide what can we do about it. And it's not, every company cannot do everything about what happens. You have to have a certain knowledge, skill, capability as a company. And lastly, what can we do about it? So these are the basic things. So let's try and find out what is going on in the semiconductor industry right now. And I'm going to do it in these sort of headlines. First, I'll talk a little bit about the cycle, then the structure of the market, then into semiconductor companies themselves, which is the core of my research, their strategy and how they're divided. Then we talk about supply and demand drivers, and then the future, because that looks pretty insane at this point in time. So this is the semiconductor cycle according to WSTS. WSTS is a trade organization that probably most of you have heard of. Some of you might even follow these numbers. And when I started in the industry, the old hand said to me, yeah, Claus, you're very interested in the semiconductor cycle, but don't worry about it. Things go up and they go down and they come up again. And then you'll have bonus again. Just make sure you time your kids, get your kids arriving in the up cycle. Then you can afford them. They're not in the down cycle, okay? I made sure of do that, but I was still very interested in the cycle. And it's very interesting because all semiconductor companies and everybody in the supply chain are trying to invest at the same time. And that's when they have the money. And when do we have the money? On the top of the cycle. Oh, sorry, got a little bit ahead of myself here. Here and here. This is where the business is good. You can fund everything with your cash flow and retained earnings. But unfortunately, that's not the best time to invest, because 2 years later, you will have a fab, and it's down here or down here. Oh, it's not perfect timing. So many follow the cycle to understand when do we need to push the pedal and when do we need to relax. It's not perfect science, but many do that. But what has happened here recently is that there's something else going on. About a year ago, Evertiq were kind enough to hire me, and I talked about the tsunami that was coming. And there I saw the end of the semiconductor cycle as we know it. Things were decoupling, and a tsunami of AI-related business were coming on us. Now we're in water to the mid-level here, because it's already here. And what you could see here, this is the February numbers from WSTS. This is the average growth. We're now at 45% level. It's not been there before. That's new territory. You can see last one, it was 27, and before that 38. Now we're at a level that is 45% above the last top, the last peak. And according to the semiconductor cycle, which is 4 years and been pretty accurate, it wasn't disrupted by dot-com crisis, financial crisis, COVID, or anything else. We are about to enter the down cycle. It doesn't look like the down cycle to me, but that's just my opinion. So, we'll dig into a little bit more detail, but we are in a situation where we are entering a new phase that people don't quite know how to handle, and it's not business as usual. This is a structural change of the industry. Does that mean it not go down again? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that we don't know the rules anymore. The rules are new. Let me just show you the WSTS forecast that they have been kind enough to provide me with. So now we will see that we'll get to a level. This is a 12 months running average that is 2x the last cycle at the end of this year. So we're talking a max peak of 38% before this, Now 104 billion at 108% growth. And who says it's going to stop there? So we are now in uncharted territories. We will be at least 6 months into a market that's not seen a downturn for some long time. But of course, there are no guarantees just because it's a forecast. So we need to dive into a little bit more detail. WSTS are not perfect. They account for less than half the revenue as members, and they don't know exactly what goes on because members are shielded. They give their numbers to an accounting company that gives it to WSTS, so they don't know where it comes from. But in reality, if you see a big bump from Korea, I'll probably guess who it is. Okay, but it's the best that we have. Unfortunately, it's a very one-dimensional number. So I don't know how many in here are going to make an investment decision based on the numbers I just shown you. Anybody here who feels comfortable doubling everything? Probably not. We need a little bit more detail. Maybe I'm not participating in the big WSTS number. Maybe I'm a little bit deeper into the chain. So this is why I dive into the network. So what you see here is the semiconductor industry over the last 15 years. Up here, you got them divided into subgroups. Big one is semiconductors, then you got tools, foundry, packaging materials, and semiconductor materials here. And as you could see, that has, number one, grown a lot, quite a lot over the last decade, but it's also changed structure. So the semiconductor looks pretty similar. Foundry has grown a little bit. Tools looks about the same, but down here in the supply area, actually that is quite a big decline. So what we're seeing here is that overall, less, I would say not materials because that's not wrong, less revenue materials are generating more revenue. So there's something changing here. Of course, we know that there's some high profits here and there, but this is really the first example of where the foundation of the industry is actually not growing, while everything is growing rapidly. If this was a sandcastle, I'm not saying it is, but it's pretty weak. So let me show you a little bit about how these companies are structured and how they invest, sectors. So down here you got how much they spend on revenue, on R&D of their revenue. Here you got 10%. And here's how much they spend on investments in CapEx. So what you see here is each of the groups have a certain defined area where they operate. If you have a packaging company, you don't need to buy big semiconductor fabs. You maybe need some more clean room or some more tools, but you don't need to fundamentally go out and buy a new factory. You could see foundry, not surprising, is high CapEx, but it's been declining. Semis have been very high R&D and is declining somewhat due to some developments I'll show later. But over here, you actually got something like OSAT, which is the outsourced test and assembly, is actually on a movement. They are becoming from low-cost Chinese sweatshops. They're now becoming companies with technology, with R&D, with PhDs and everything else, because this is where one of the revolutions is happening. AI is not because NVIDIA moved a lot of their new products onto better nodes at TSMC. It's really because they packaged things closer. Memory gets closer to micro gets closer to micro, because there's a limit to how big you can make them. And all of this pops out magic. I know there's a few more ingredients, but really think of it as a packaging revolution more than a semiconductor revolution, as in technology. That will also happen. But right now it's about this. So what you saw before was that it looked like the industry had not changed that much over 15 years. And this is correct. But here you see the relative growth since the last down cycle. So this is 23 beginning. This looks completely different. So semiconductors are growing over 100%. Materials, nah. This looks interesting. This is when I don't get enough sleep, when things like this happen. But this industry is not in a cyclical change anymore. It's in a structural change. And that affects all of us in the industry, wherever you are. You need to understand what's going on here. And here you also see that OSAT is growing. I normally like to hear myself talk, but now I'm thinking, oof, that was better. So this is this is the first takeaway about how this industry is changing. Let us move on. Tools are quite interesting. Back in, I think around year 2000, the US military woke up one morning collectively and found out that actually most of the stuff we use are either from Intel or it's from Taiwan. And then Intel called them and said, sorry guys, Intel 7 failed. We couldn't do it without EUV tools. And we're going to be in trouble over the next few years. And the military said, okay. And this is basically when all of the embargo started, that you want to prevent expensive light and magic tools from Holland to enter China. And that's just evolved over time. More and more got embargoed. Of course, when you do an embargo, what does that do? What does that do? It stimulates demand. So the Chinese started to buy a lot more tools because you don't know what got embargoed yet. So basically, we had a period of time where the market was dominated completely by China. Up here, you can see here, this is from 23, and China bought most of the tools that were made in the industry. So up here, you see it looks fairly okay. There's good growth over time, a little bit wobbly here. But when you take China out of the image, you see that there's a big void. This void is where companies didn't invest, and in particular, the memory companies were quite careful because they've just been through a couple of years where they not only had red numbers, they had negative gross margins. I don't know about you, but I don't like negative. I certainly don't like negative gross margins, and they produced all through it because that's the way they do right now. So this void is hitting us now, and you can see we're not really selling tools at a level that was higher than the last peak. So this tells us, again, I say the network is a time machine. This tells us that we're probably experiencing some shortages over a longer time. We shouldn't expect everything to grow back into normal, go back into the down cycle, and then off we go and spend our bonus check. We're in for trouble. Then we look at packaging. This is where there's a lot of action going on. Remember, this was voluntarily outsourced mainly by American companies to the Far East because it was low cost, it was labor intensive, it was boring. And now it's suddenly fun again because this is where a lot of the action is. And a couple of years ago, a little bit more, TSMC has been doing advanced packaging for longer than that. But a couple of years ago, it became part of their official strategy called Foundry 2.0. It gave them a benefit of not having 75% market share anymore. So the American government would look at them and say, this looks like a monopoly. By adding the OSAT market into it, they lowered their market share a little bit, so it looks slightly better. But the reality is that TSMC immediately pumped a lot of money into the OSAT market. You could see over here, here you see the CapEx share. Quite fast, it went to just under 30% of all the investments in OSAT were made by TSMC. And of course, revenue followed, whoop. And now it's about 20, and it'll probably go up into that range again. Again here, I think, although they talk a lot about, America being self-sufficient, they don't like to invest into areas that don't give guaranteed return. And we see this here as well, like Amcor's down here, where Aasholm Technology and TSMC have decided, okay, we are going to spend the most on R&D. We're going to move this forward. So I think we're seeing the winners. And this also means that, hey, we're back to Taiwan again. So right now, the Americans are building leading edge fabs, while the Taiwanese are building leading edge fabs and plenty of OSAT capacity. And of course, the funny thing about TSMC in Arizona, which Americans are very proud of, look at this. We now have homegrown, homemade American capacity. Yeah, I know it's Taiwanese are operating the fabs, and Taiwanese knows all of the IP. But this is what it is. It's American. And now it's moving to OSAT. And right now they're transporting Taiwan wafers. They're transporting Arizona wafers back to Taiwan to be packaged, and then back to, not back to, actually to Taiwan to get put into a server, all American. No, it's not. It's just like, it's politics. So we want to make sure that, it looks American, but it's not really American. And they're again behind the curve here. There are some other companies that are going to move here, but right now there are only two that have taken the mantle. What are we doing for time? We're behind. Then there's Foundry. There's no surprise to this chart. Foundry is growing very, very much and very fast, and it's driven by TSMC. And it's not getting less competitive or less monopolistic, as you can see up here. This is the annual growth rate, and TSMC is way ahead of everybody else. And that means if you think the others are catching up, sorry guys, they're not. TSMC is ahead, and they'll stay there. What is a little bit more interesting is I'll show you 3 charts here of TSMC. The first one is the annual price change. So this is a wafer when it comes out of TSMC. So right now it's about $8,500 in average. That of course covers very, very expensive 3 nanometers, soon to be 2, but also quite cheap, mature technology. What is more interesting is the cost is going down. This is a new development. Okay, and that is because of a very, very specific reason. You can also see it over here. TSMC have been adding capacity in, if we measure it in 12-inch equivalent wafers, this means the physical output. It's dropped a little bit here in Q4, and this is what's it projected to be over the next year. TSMC is not going to add capacity overall. Okay, this is not the story that's out there. The story is out there is, we're building American fabs, we're building 16 fabs in Taiwan, we're building fabs everywhere, but the overall capacity is not going up. Okay? Talk about swimming against the stream here. And of course, the utilization rate is close to 100. And this is one of the strategic conundrums these, what should we call them, quasi-monopolistic companies have. They are the only ones to produce a certain thing. It's in high demand. Is it in their interest to increase capacity too much? Maybe not. Maybe it is very, very good to make sure that you have some bargaining power and don't increase it too much, okay? So this is the situation that TSMC is in right now. Does this mean that we're not gonna get a lot of 3 and 2 nanometer capacity? No, it does not. It means that they are gonna de-emphasize their old technologies. And that impacts everybody, okay? They're gonna say, I don't wanna do a wafer that gives me $1,000 when I can do one that gives me soon maybe 30, okay? So under all of this is going on, and this will impact everybody because so many are dependent on this company. So if there's one thing to take away from today, this is it. So if we look at the Foundry became popular back in '87 when Morris Chang went from TI back to Taiwan and got a little bit of bucks. They actually started TSMC with $35 million. I don't know what you can start for $35 million today, but it's pretty interesting. And now it's a dominant force. But what you of course did was you laid the foundation for the fabless model. Before that, most companies were integrated device manufacturers. They made their own products, they sold their own products under their own brand, classical Intel. But around this time, already a quarter of the market was fabless. Now it's 60, of course, driven by NVIDIA revenue. There's no surprise there. But this model has been incredibly successful over time. And it's not going the other way. Here, you can see how much NVIDIA dominates it. It's quite a lot, okay? So just bear that in mind. Right now it's carried by one company, and the entire industry growth is carried by one company, but that's about to change. They'll get help from somebody else soon. If we look at the dominance of some of these companies, I have a chart up here, and the chart shows a percentage down here and a percentage up here. This percentage shows how much does this company own of the entire semiconductor revenue. Okay, so here we are at 2015, and you can see Intel owns about 20% of the total revenue of the industry and about 22% of the total operating profit. All other companies up here, and as you could see, there was about a little under a quarter that was still spread over less than top 15 companies. Now, if PowerPoint wants to let me run the animation, we can see what goes on and how this develops over time up until today. Yes, it is that Intel that you heard about that were actually up there. Intel and Samsung were dominated the industry 10 years ago. And then you see there's Intel's demise. Samsung is still doing well. And then, of course, you will see the big memory crash where everybody goes south and some go north shortly before we see the end game here. Now we're at 21. Intel is still hanging in there. And now we'll start to see that the memory dip and then NVIDIA rising. So this is 2025 Q4 we're coming to now, the last full quarter where everybody reported. And as you could see, NVIDIA is up there. All other are significantly lower than they were just 10 quarters ago. And now we see SK Hynix coming. Samsung is still out here. That'll change. They have a quite good quarter. So they'll come fast. But the reality is that top 15 have much more share now. And we are only in the beginning of the memory super cycle that we're going to enter now. I need to speed up here. We had the IDMs, and then we had a number of companies that use what I call the hybrid manufacturing. This is they have their own factories for certain products, and then they buy high-end, typically high-end digital from TSMC. And these companies have not participated fully in this cycle. You see the peak here, and now we're 14 quarters later. This is the forecast for Q1 or the guidance. And as you could see, this does not look like a strong upturn. I have to say, because there's certain people in the audience, that certain companies have surprised over the last few days and gave a better than expected guidance. So we might see that changing now. But for now, this is not something that looks like 104% revenue growth. And the problem is that these companies are much more important, personal opinion, than AI, because these are the ones that keep us safe, fed, warm, mobile, employed, with all of the products, the multitude of products that they pour into the world. I'll pace it now, getting behind. Trying to divide the market in a little bit different way shows you the share of non-AI, basically, products that are now left. This is the AI compute market, now a third. A memory market is the third, and the rest is a third. This is not going to stay this way. The third, that is all the other, is going to rapidly decline and become less important. And also, companies in this area are going to look to AI for growth. It's as simple as that. You want to look at where's it growing most. And they're already participating, but they'll be participating more. I'm going to accelerate. So where's this all coming from? This is no surprise. The data centers are really investing like crazy, and it's going to be even wilder than it is now. This has, of course, made the processing revenue into the data center quite dramatically high. This is Q1 just for the companies that have reported. But as you could see, of course, dominated by NVIDIA, and here NVIDIA is treated as a semiconductor, which is arguable. I'm okay with that. What is also interesting over here is that here you see it by AI processing, and you see it by networking and CPU. So CPU is at a lot lower level than it was, but it might change because agentic AI like CPUs also, so we might see more coming out there. More interestingly is that network is becoming a key element. So everybody's focused on GPUs, but reality is that it's about packaging and it's about networking that drives this. And I think that's worth taking away if you're in any of those areas. Of course, then we have data center revenue. The reality is that between this point and this point, not much capacity was added. There's some, but it was not a lot. It was the output of the lowest investment cycle ever. So you should sort of think about this as this is a lot of it is to expansion of price. Of course, in this period, the memory makers built for inventory and die banks and wherever they could, and here they have released it. So there's a little bit of that. But the inventory situation of the memory companies are now at absolutely lean. They can't take any more from anywhere. So we're running on an empty gas tank, and it needs to be refilled every quarter. If we look at it overall, here you see the total market, the total semiconductor market. Up here, the red is the data center market, and you can see all other categories are still below the peak. And here you see the share of data center revenue of overall semiconductor. It's now at over 51%. I'll let you guess where you think it's going to be next year. I have my own guess. And that's going to be a lot less. Not a lot less data center, but a lot less other. So let me go get to demand and supply quickly. I'm still have a few minutes, not too many. So I'll go through this very, very fast. The first thing is that a year ago I talked a lot about embargoes and these things. But once again, the industry has proven to be incredibly resilient. We could see the Russians bombed Mariupol, which produced 50% of all the neon the industry used, and industry recovered. Now we have a similar problem with helium because a lot of it comes from natural gas production from the Gulf and needs to get out of the Hormuz Strait. Who hasn't heard about the Hormuz Strait? Okay. So I'm not too fussy about this right now and not seeing any changes. And I think, once again, the industry will be resilient. If I'm wrong, I'll just, report the numbers. I'm not too fussy about that. What is a little bit more worrying is that supply of memory is not very good at the moment. Prices are increasing quite a lot. And that, of course, impacts demand, mostly in these areas, but for sure, mobile and client much more than the hybrid companies and much more than AI infrastructure. Let me just show you one slide about China. I probably had 50 last time. China is still there, but it's not very visible at the moment. It's chugging along. It's not part of the AI revolution as we could see it. But there is a couple of interesting data points that's quite important. That is, they're still building semiconductor production. Here you see how it's growing since the beginning of 20. They've added 90% more capacity, almost doubled during these 6 years. The other two areas that are important for AI is, of course, power. This is the growth in power generation units, and this is of automation industrial robots. So these are going to be important for the AI revolution. So you might have data centers in the US, but servers needs to be built in China, and the power needs to come from China and everything else. So it's a problem for the AI revolution. The other thing is this. Here you see the export and import unit price of China. And chugging along, and something's going on here. And of course, this is the Chinese memory companies now beginning to sell and buy into the West. I think especially probably NAND at the moment. That's where they have the best option. But this is a clear sign that Chinese memories are now accepted in Europe. Fast on CapEx. This is a game for the big boys. There's only a few companies that really dominate this industry, and you here I have them color coded, so you can see here you got the IDMs, you got the hybrids, and you got the foundries. Samsung is a little bit shared. So not spending too much on this. What is more interesting is if you try and look at it as in memory capex and other capex. You can see over here, you had a memory capex that was about 55%. That has been, sorry, here it's a logic, other capex, sorry. Let me try and get my brain reversed. And you can see that the memory capex has been quite low. It had a boost here, but all of this cycle, memory capex has really not grown. And there was a good reason. It was, pricing were really, really horrible and everybody were very careful. Right now we're here. So something is beginning to happening, but it's not been underway long. And the forecast shows that over the next year or so, or 2 years, we're really going to see the memory companies be dominant in capex according to their forecast. And why is that? So this is the overall pricing curves of, and this is relative to pricing in the beginning of 19. For as long as I have data back here. And as you could see, memory prices were really low in the cycle. And this is how the big memory companies looked at it. They saw this is really bloody. We're not investing. We can't afford it. We don't have any money. We need to borrow. So they were very careful. Then the cycle started and everybody were happy. But memory NAND prices collapsed. There's a handful of reasons behind that. But everybody got scared. And even more scared was it when DRAM prices started to decline a little bit. So what we're seeing now is that now pricing are going, up until the sky, and we're only in the beginning of it. We will have much more for memory buyers, much more pain before we're getting released. So here, this is looking into the Micron machine room a little bit, because that tells us what's going on in the different markets. And what you have is, over here you got the revenue by their 4 divisions. The core and cloud are central to their data center business. Mobile and client are phones and PCs, and here you got the rest of the market basically. And all of these markets, revenue is growing quite fast. No surprise there. What we see over here is the cost of goods sold. And this gives us some insight into how much are they actually shipping to these markets, not how much revenue is there. And here we see that mobile and client are getting a lot less product than they did, just a few quarters ago. Okay, they actually cut 1/3 of their capacity to these companies, and of course they've given it to cloud. So far, the auto-embedded have been reasonably spared. But what is more interesting is here you see the gross margins. Right now, Micron is making more on mobile and PC clients than they are on the data center. Okay, this is news. Of course, this is due to long contracts and everything else, but it's still pretty crazy. And also, it looks pretty high. We're up approaching 80s for these. So, how the hell do you get memory? You can go to the spot market, but that's a very, very small piece of the market. Or you can go and pay the price, the current price of the day. But right now, it doesn't matter how much you pay. It's all already been booked. So what you need to do is you need to book in advance. And to book in advance, you basically have to accept an order, which is the same as cash. Basically, you can't run away from an order. And what you see here is the development that has happened over the last time. This is the purchasing commitments the largest companies have made. They were about 250 billion. Now it's 600. And look how much has been added the last 2 quarters, from 4 to 600 billion. So these large companies are now committing 200 additional billions. And it is real money, it's a lot of it, to companies, including memory companies, to make sure that they get product. And Micron just revealed that they have a client now that are on a 5-year contract. That's longer than the semiconductor cycle, so that tells you a lot. Let me just show a couple of other demand drivers. I'm very short on time now. Smartphone is up here, a little bit up due to Apple gaining some market share, but the rest you could see PC, flat panel, everything else is not doing well. Servers doing okay. This is without NVIDIA servers, so these are the traditional server companies. But of course you could see I plotted in cloud revenue. which is a source of income for the large hyperscalers. That's the only thing that's really, really going high. So this is what drives everything from a demand perspective and well for the future. Data center capex. This is crazy. We're here at Q4. Now every quarter is $170 billion investment. Looks like this from 21 to 56. And of course, all of this fuels into to basically, I wouldn't say two companies because that's not true, but these two companies are driving a lot of the demand. And these are, of course, OpenAI and Anthropic. And as you could see, they are on a growth rate trajectory we've not seen before. They're not doubling annually, they are becoming 10 times bigger. We don't know how long this can last, but you don't need to grow your revenue at 10x a year before it becomes attractive, I would call it. But these companies will be the size of NVIDIA in a year and a half from now, the size NVIDIA is now. Actually, they have no problem getting money. OpenAI just raised more than 100 billion in their last capital expansion, and both of them will go IPO this quarter. I do not make stock recommendations, I repeat once again. Not for SpaceX either, that's also going to IPO. But these are a new class of companies. We have no clue about how they will operate a few years from now. They can be a big flop or they can be very, very big. I know what I'm doing, but I'll not let you know. I'll talk shortly about this, one line each, and then we will see another 65% capex growth in 2026. And it was 1% lower last year. And then it'll cool a little bit according to the analysts, but the reality is they don't know. We'll have new IPOs that will bring new fuel. SpaceX is trillions is the valuation, so Musk will get a nice injection. And then we have some of the things that are gonna come next. And then we have Terafab, and Terafab is a crazy venture. Elon Musk is talking about making a factory that generates 1 terawatt of AI compute every year. Right now, the entire industry is about 122 gigawatts. Okay, he's talking about making 10 times that in a year. Okay, and a gigawatt cost, if it's AI infrastructure, costs around $50 billion. So we're talking real money. It's not fun and games. Will he be able to make it? I don't know. But he's done impressive things before. You can think of him what you want. The future cloud capex, I just want to show it here because they already have it. So 66% and then maybe cooling to 13 means that we are not at the end of anything. And then I want to give you a perspective on the memory companies because right now NVIDIA have been the one that have been driving top line and bottom line growth for the industry. But memory companies are going to become very, very big now. SK Hynix will likely, at the end of this year, be the second largest company, ahead of TSMC. And you'll see Micron will be the size of TSMC. This is crazy. What is even more crazy is this is 78% gross margin made by NVIDIA a few quarters back. This was the highest recorded gross margin for any semiconductor company. Let's say meaningful, because there's probably a Chinese that did something. Any meaningful company, nobody's ever been there. And NVIDIA is projecting to be around here, but two companies are now going to get into above 80% gross margins. Okay, this is completely crazy. And unless the high memory prices are going to, dampen demand in the AI sector, which it doesn't look like right now, we're going to see a completely new industry structure that is going to be dominated by memory capex, memory revenue, and everything else. So that's going to be, if you need memory, you should have booked it last year. That's my recommendation. Then a quick note on can they afford it? Because there's a lot of memes running around about the circular economy. And it's a relative question. And here we see free cash flow, which is basically the operating cash flow minus capex. And this gives you an idea if these companies can afford it. And so far in 25, basically everybody have been able to to feed this without actually having to go into debt. But 26 is going to be different. There, the growth of the cloud companies is not fast enough to support the growth of CapEx. So especially here, you got Amazon here. Amazon will need probably to go find a new way of financing this because they can't do it by their business alone. Right now, debt is at, well, I say not much, but 200 billion here and 200 billion there. But they can probably cover for that. I want to end with my last slide. And that is a comparison between the industry 5 years ago and now. And as you could see out here, semiconductor revenue has grown significantly. It's almost doubled. Of course, it was dominated somewhat by the fabless companies, gone from 30 to 106. These were the leading companies back in 2020, and now, NVIDIA is about the size of Intel. But look at the cloud CapEx. The cloud CapEx is 339% higher. And the semiconductor CapEx is 69% higher. Maybe these two numbers don't need to be married, but I would expect them to date at least. Okay? So this is basically my presentation, and I think I almost made it. No, almost not, sorry. Okay, so are we okay for questions? Okay, good. So thank you very much for your attention, and let me hear if there are any questions.